I'm going to talk about is going to give a brief overview of the population scenario in Singapore. Actually, I don't work on Singapore. I just put this presentation here. Uh, for those who are in Singapore, many of those issues might be very familiar, right? But I'm going to start with, obviously, for population change, we need fertility, mortality, and migration. I'm going to briefly present on those three things. And I'm going to show you some population scenarios, population projections for the future, what it might look like. So let's look at the fertility. Obviously, this goes to 2100, beyond 2015, those are projections. The values before 2015 are actual data. Singapore is a blue line, so rapid decrease in fertility. Right now, I think it's 1.3. I think one of the lowest in the world. So let's assume, the projections I'm going to show you assume that the fertility might go a bit further up to 1.5. Right? It's not going to be 2. This assumption is based on the experience of other countries that have gone through this transition over the last 50 years. Despite government's effort over the last 20 years, so odd years, fertility hasn't gone up. The government has spent billions of dollars promoting family policies, cash incentives. You get right now you get an $8,000 cash incentive if at the birth of the child. You get housing and so on and so on. But it has not gone up, and there's no reason for us to expect that it will go up. The maximum it might go up is to 1.5. So let's look at that. And you can see, like in previous talks, people are talking about Singapore's place in Southeast Asia and reflections and so on. And you can see how different Singapore is in demographic terms here. Okay, let's look at life expectancy. The book that was just now passed along from third world to first has some pictures of Singapore. We can see in the 1960s, malaria was the major cause of death in Singapore, right? A massive death rates due to malaria and other infectious diseases. But you can see this trajectory here clearly shows one aspect of this transition going on. Right? If you, right now, the life expectancy, I think it may be second or third highest in the world, it's about 84. And we can expect by next 50 years, the life expectancy is around 95. Life expectancy. That means if you retire at 65, you have 30 more years to live. So obviously the concept of retirement age is still debated in Singapore, right? Increasing life expectancy doesn't make sense to have retirement age. So again, this is not very controversial, like the fertility, mortality projections are not very controversial, they can make sense, it makes sense. The next one that I'm going to show is migration, which is in the Singapore context is quite controversial and quite difficult to project. Right? What do we look at? As for those of us who are living in Singapore, know this peak, which happened between 2000 and 2010, when the government took in close to 100,000 migrants a year. And we're talking about a population of 4 million in 2000, and you're taking 100,000 new migrants a year. You see the peak here. But since 2010, the number of migrants have gone down. And again, this is difficult to project because it's entirely based on government policy. Singapore doesn't have refugee population. There are no, so to speak, uninvited people coming to the shores of Singapore. So it's fully controlled, right? So how much intake is going to be there? Again, based on the government's own policy. A few years back, the government put out a white paper in response to growing public concern about huge influx of migrants. And after the general election in 2011. So the government has said that it's going to control the population, the inflow, and it has cut the inflows quite drastically. But still, my projections, the projections I'm going to show you, assume about 30,000 net migrants. Obviously, many Singaporeans are also going overseas because Singapore, as we're seeing, is a very globalized city. I think there are about 200,000 overseas Singaporean now. Right? And many of them may not return back to Singapore. Right? So this is net of those that are leaving Singapore. So these are the three things. Obviously, we can talk about the assumptions behind this. And let's see what happens to the population if we assume those things. There are various scenarios that could happen, but let me focus on this thick red line, which is the median variant, right? Based on all those scenarios. Most likely by 2100, we will have a population that is slightly smaller than what we have today, if these projections, if you look at these projections and so on. The only scenario where you have a dramatic increase in population is when all the projections hold true on the number of children increases to replacement level, and we still take in, we are taking in 30,000 migrants, right? So for the population structure, the population size most likely is going to decline, right? If based on our own assumptions that we made. Okay, let's look at the population structure here. Population structure, again, we saw the life expectancies and so on. You see, this is 65 plus. See a huge increase in population who are going to be 65 plus. At the same time, a decline in the population who are 15 to 64. Taking in migrants is also not a good way to address aging. It doesn't slow down aging as much as it is the size, because the migrants you take in also age, and most of the migrants who come in are already in their 20s or late 30s. Right? It's not as if having children. Okay, so there's one other way of looking at the same situation with aging. So right now we have, let's say we have about nine people who are 25 to 69 per 70-year-old person. In most of the scenarios that we looked at, right, it's not going to change. It's going to be maybe about 25 to 69 per 70-year-old person, regardless of the various scenarios that we looked at. So migration is not a solution for dealing with aging. So we're looking at in terms of population size and population distribution. We are looking at a situation where the population is going to decline. We're looking at a situation where the age composition is likely to be older. Okay, so right now the other big aspect in population in Singapore is what % of this population is actually made up of citizens. Right now, I think it's about 60% is citizen population. This is by the government's, on the white paper, the government simulated the various scenarios. So if you grant 25,000 new citizenships every year, then the population size might go up to 4 million by 2016. Anything less than 25,000 new citizenship, the population of citizens is going to go down. Okay, so the big idea here is we're looking at decline in population and aging population, and then the composition of the population is going to be highly different, right? We were talking about building cities and so on. The buildings that we're going to build in Singapore, if you look at the population size and population composition, may not be inhabited by Singaporeans. Most likely may not be inhabited by Singaporeans. So those are the points I wanted to make, just to show that who are we building this for? Many of the buildings with the population size is going down. We don't need to invest so much on the infrastructural needs or building housing and so on the policies. And the only solution, as we saw before, the only solution is to take in more migrants. Again, taking in more migrants might increase the population size, but may not address the issues related to aging. Okay, thank you.